Well, students, welcome back. Mr. Offer, we're still here in 1302. This is session 3, part 3. This is a wrap-up of what we've talked about. Now, in this session, we talked about McKinley, President McKinley, which a lot of people don't know about. I've never heard of. We talked about the Spanish-American War, the sinking of the Maine. Probably the most important thing I always like to think about this session, there's a couple of things. Number one, we went to war with Spain over Cuba, over an event that we accused them of doing, them being the Spanish, which was sinking of the Maine, which now we know they had nothing to do with that. That was an accidental explosion. We blamed the Spanish for that. We went to war. Basically, America we were very interested in Cuban interest, agricultural interest in Cuba, and we were looking for a reason. And we went over there and we fought. The interesting thing I don't think I mentioned is how that war actually ended. You know, guys, when that thing was over with, even though we say we won that war, we ended up paying Spain X amount of money. I forget how many millions we paid them. So it's almost like we went to a war, and in the end, we paid them for Cuba, or for the rights of Cuba. Cuba's going to come up through the course of this. Through this course, we're going to talk about Cuba. Then the other interesting thing was that vice president, Theodore Roosevelt. You know, Roosevelt, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Theodore Roosevelt. And I'll tell you guys something. Roosevelt is one of the most interesting presidents that we've ever had. We're also coming up, guys, to that presidential essay that you're going to have to write. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of detail in this lecture series because I actually do an entire YouTube how-to series on that. But you're going to write a paper on the greatest president of the 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt starts off the 20th century. It will go to Bill Clinton. So Roosevelt, when we come back, I will introduce you to Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. And I can tell you right now that Theodore Roosevelt, hands down, is one of the most interesting of all the presidents we've ever had. He's a very interesting guy. I used to say that we'd never have another Theodore Roosevelt. We'd never have another guy like Roosevelt. So let's think about it. Theodore Roosevelt is wealthy. Theodore Roosevelt is from New York City. Theodore Roosevelt had a problem not being able to shut his mouth. He was always talking. And number 4, Theodore Roosevelt and the media did not get along. So let's think about that. You got a rich guy from New York that talks a lot, that can't get along with the media. Any clues who that sounds like? I think you probably know, but I don't want to spoil that whole Theodore Roosevelt lecture series because we're going to be talking about him a lot. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this. We've ended this out here. It was a very pretty day. A little on the cold side out here today, but that ends up session 3 of History 1302. This is the 8-week course. We come back session 4. We're going to talk about TR. Theodore Roosevelt. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, Roosevelt did not pronounce his name Roosevelt. He pronounced it Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this session. Pretty day out here. We come back, we're in session 4. We'll see you then.